Everything do want to I and I. Blood, sweat, and tears, African sacrifice. We want the reparation. Soul, lie, inheritance, and give a perverted governance. I want the reparation. Repair to return to mama.
I think that we have arrived at a point where diplomacy has failed. As you know, there is no official political relationship or diplomatic relationship between Denmark and the Virgin Islands, and that is a direct result of the sale in 1917. We've had several meetings, with the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they've participated in some of the meetings of the Joint Task Force. Yes, we've had meetings with Danish elected officials or politicians, but we've seen a great insensitivity shown. And I think that the idea of opening a dialogue on slavery elicits great shame and perhaps a great deal of ignorance as well. And the Danish government and people pride themselves on their human rights achievements, and on their humanitarianism. And, they pride themselves on their carbon footprint, and on restoring the Danish built heritage, whether it be in Ghana or in other places around the world. But to discuss slavery and to discuss the sale in 1917 is something that we have found that they are not interested in doing. So the letter in, I think it was October the 23rd, 2009, we are now in August of 2010, has not yet been answered. I don't expect it to be at this point. And I think that it will just historically serve as a record and as a documented record that this issue has been ignored by the Danish state. And what we have achieved is a people-to-people initiative and network. People working to bring about repair. Yes, it is hopeful that at some point the Danish government and back home the Virgin Islands government, even though they have expressed a great deal of support, there's nothing that they can do without the cooperation of the Danish state. But so it is our desire and our prayer that one day they'll wake up and accept their responsibility. Again, if you revisit the history, you will find that Charlotte Amalie, the capital of the Virgin Islands today, was the second largest city in all of Denmark for a period of almost 200 years. And that is at a time when Denmark was much bigger than it is today. That is when Denmark was Sweden and Iceland and Greenland and parts of Germany, the island in the Baltic Sea. That is when Denmark was Tranquebar and the Danish West Indies and the Faroe Islands. That is when Charlotte Amalie contributed anywhere from 50% to 2/3 of Denmark's gross national product or gross domestic product, however you want to say it, that being in sugar and rum and textiles, or not necessarily textiles, but the raw material for textiles, cotton, in timber, mahogany, and all kinds of other commodities. But we cannot forget the commodity that has brought me here to this table and discussion today, and that is the human commodity, the black gold. And so, and you understand that there is a responsibility, because my people, in fact, are the original creditors of the modern state of Denmark. When you can go to the seat of government, parliament, when you can go to Marienborg, and when you can go to Amalienborg, and you can visit the Oddfellow Palace and the hotels down by the canals, and you understand that all of these things are the residue and the remnants of a trade that made a very select group of people and powerful group of people, the fathers of the Danish state, made them very, very wealthy. And on the flip side of the coin, dehumanized the people utterly. You understand that there is a responsibility that must be upheld, and if it is our portion to bring about the awareness and the education, then that is the mission that we will carry out for however long it takes us. Yeah, but this is not something where we don't seek to beg the interest of politicians or elected officials. We are activists, and we will do what it is necessary. Reparations, it is like, there was a great man once said that mightier than the tread of great armies is the idea whose time has come. I believe it might have been Victor Hugo. But reparations is that idea whose time has come. And so, it is for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, to become involved in the repair of this people.
We want a reparation, heal our nation. We showed you how to build a nation. You showed us how to destroy one. We showed you how to feed a nation. You showed us how to start one.
Well, when we can conceptualize what reparations are, when we find that it is just the making of repairs, but in this context it is humanity that has been impaired and has need of repair, and you can understand that racism and the discussion on racism is directly tied to that. It is because the difference, why was it necessary that Africans be brought to the Danish West Indies? Why weren't they seen as equal partners? Why did they have to be enslaved? When we look at Europe in the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th centuries, when we look to West Africa at the same time, we see Mali and Shanghai and Timbuktu. We see the great wealth. We see, these great institutions of higher learning and these great civilizations. Why is it that Africans had to be dehumanized and enslaved and forced to labor without compensation? If we were going to develop the New World and the Americas, why weren't Africans seen as equal partners? And so it is a discussion that is very important today. No one can walk away from 250 years of racism and inhumanity, 175 years of chattel slavery. I don't care if you're a European or an African, if you were the slaver or the enslaved, if you were the colonizer or the colonized. No one can walk away and have their humanity remain intact and unimpaired. And so by your reports, by the reports of Danish NGOs and Danish institutions, we find that Denmark is one of the most racist nations on the face of the planet today, by reports of your media here in Denmark. And so, these incidences of hatred and violence that are carried out in the streets of Copenhagen, when we can find that the Danish state is pushing for immigrants to work for half their wages in the first year, when we can find that things like employment and health care and education are being withheld from people of color here in Denmark. These are just leaves and branches that are falling from a very big and deeply rooted tree. But those roots are firmly planted in the 250 years of Danish history that exist on the islands of St. Thomas, St. John, and St. Croix, with direct ties to Ghana, West Africa, and the history of the transatlantic slave trade and the role that Danish institutions played in the dehumanization of many, many people for generations upon generations. Slavery cannot be just defined in the context of yesterday. Slavery, properly defined, is a long-running, culture-destructive, multi-generational crime against humanity, of which the people of the Virgin Islands and the people of the greater African diaspora have yet to recover. And so that, in essence, is what the reparations movement is about. And yes, it is directly tied to the discussion on race and racism. And we will be taking a very extended and expanded look at racism in the Danish context and its history to the slave trade at sometime perhaps in September or October 2010 at the University of Roskilde. We have been invited to make a presentation or to give a lecture of some sort in connection with the 10th annual commemoration of their Cultural Encounters Department there at the University of Roskilde. We have yet to work out the details, but we will be very much happy to oblige their request to participate.